I love. She's totally back there.
Bart! Hey, everybody! Welcome to hashtag SPSM Chat. It's another Sunday, but today is not just any Sunday, SPSMers. We have a really special show for you today. Today is, I think it's Worldwide Coming Out Day. We're so excited to feature this week the first of a bookended series that we're going to be doing. Today we have Adam Topher Hunt, which is a cool name to say, or as I choose, and we'll explain that in a minute, from the Trevor Project here with us tonight. Remember, as always, to tag everything hashtag SPSM, and we will get your comments and we'll be directing them to our guest, Mr. Hunt, here in just a minute. But also remember that if you tag things to Adam Hunt and you see his Twitter tag, you can also tag things to the @Trevor Project, and they will be getting those notifications as well. Not that they need it. They're you know, quite frankly, their Twitter feed is the biggest Twitter feed I think we've ever had on the show, ever, but how appropriate for Coming Out Day. We're going to be talking about how Trevor does social media and suicide prevention really well, and very cool, we're going to be featuring issues related to the LGBTQ community throughout the week, and we'll be sort of bookending this with another related topic next Sunday. But before I, Doc Foreman, get started with the show, I want to introduce, because it's special this week for another reason, our tech producer, world traveler, Tony Wood. Did you like how the hat moved? Tony, what the hell are you doing in my dining room?
Well, I've come to Baton Rouge just to help you out.
There we go. Tony, tell folks what you do at the show and where they can find you.
At ADWWW, I do all the tech production.
And so if people
have anything that you want to say to me, or if you want something, or if you have any particular questions, it's a really good way to get the attention of our kind hosts. And I will pass it on. That's
I think I lost you. Oh.
There we go.
Welcome back.
At ADWW. So Tony Wood is here, and way over in the living room is also Craig Harmon. Fancy, he's running this way. We also have, this is like an SPSM-a-palooza in my dining room, Craig Harmon, who will also be tweeting in.
There's Craig right there.
Whoops, Craig didn't make it.
Oh.
Oh.
Come on, say hello, Craig.
Say hello, Craig.
They're looking at your empty chair. Ah, there's Craig.
There's Craig Harmon. So we've got a full house in the Foreman house tonight, but Dr. Bart Andrews is so big that they can only put one of him in his house. Dr. Bart Andrews, our other moderator.
I got a favorite tweet for the night already from Marshman503. Holy shit, my volume is too high for Doc Foreman's voice. SPSM. We can ramp the energy up just a little bit higher, Foreman. Let's get it up.
I'm only halfway through my cup of coffee.
So, at Bart Andrews, you can reach me on Twitter. I pop in occasionally just to see what's going on. I work at the amazing Behavioral Health Response, a crisis agency in St. Louis, Missouri. My big news for the week is we presented to the mental health commissioners of the state of Missouri, who are over the entire Department of Mental Health. Great folks, and we got to present on zero suicide, which was very cool. And folks left really fired up about zero suicide. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the community, a lot of stuff going on in Missouri, and I'm really excited, so excited about the Trevor Project being here. Like I was telling Adam earlier, when folks ask me, who do I see doing social media and suicide prevention really well out there in the community, Trevor Project is one of the first names that comes to mind. So I'm really excited, and Adam is a joy, and I just can't wait to hear more from him. So let's do this thing.
And without any further ado, everybody, this is Mr. Adam Hunt. Everybody give it up for Adam Hunt. Yay! So, Adam, we're so excited to have you from Trevor Project, especially because you're our first guest with a fancy background.
I think there's a technical thing. Something's going on. I'm getting a repeat of everything that's already been said, and I'm hearing it again. I don't know if that's happening for anybody else. I'm sorry to interrupt this.
I think he needs to come off. Very cool. And I'm really excited.
So, Adam, I think that maybe what's happening is that things aren't muted.
Is that what?
Is you're getting feedback from your end of things because I muted Bart and I, and I'm still hearing us on your end of things. So you might we're having, like we do on SPSM, the normal technical difficulties because, let's face it, the technology platforms are a little bit finicky. But here we are, we're coping through it. Try again now. Does that sound better, Adam?
It's like it's repeating everything that was said maybe 2 minutes ago.
So, Adam, what I'm going to have you do while we talk a little bit about y'all is I'm going to have you hang up and rejoin the call, and I'm going to talk about how we met, okay?
Perfect. I'm going to do that.
All right, hang up and rejoin. So, everybody, I want to talk to you a little bit about how I met Adam Hunt and how I knew that this was going to be a great show. Last April at AAS, some very groovy guy was walking by with just the best pair of shoes on. I know that I would notice something like that, but it had a little piece of paper attached to it. And so he's walking by, and I thought, those shoes are awesome, and he doesn't know that there's like something sort of attached to the edge, and he's going to think I'm totally creepy because I don't even know this guy, but I have no shame, and we all know that I have no shame. And so then I'm like, hey, I'm totally creepy, but I just want to pull this piece of trash off your shoe. And that is how I met Adam Hunt, which is whose name I would often forget, but who I often remember as, he has cool shoes. So, having approached him in a creepy way, he scurried away from me in fear because, let's face it, you would run away from me in fear if I was pulling trash off your feet randomly. But then we ran into each other later. And talk a little bit about that, Adam.
Running into each other?
Yeah, so then we ran into each other. Actually, I was talking with one of your colleagues, and we were talking about being on the show, and you showed up, and I'm like, cool shoes.
Oh, yeah, and... sorry, where did you leave off?
I just pulled the trash off your shoes, and I'm sure that you had to scurry away in fear.
Oh yeah, that was great. I was like, this crazy lady. Sorry, I shouldn't say crazy, but
we're having it. Bart, are we still having the technical difficulties?
Yeah,
Bart?
he's in some kind of a lag, right? So his video, I don't know if it's a bandwidth issue, but his video isn't keeping up with the volume, and then there's like this thing that's circling back. It's like something.
Are you streaming? Can you close out any other windows you have open, Adam? Tony's going to come. Tony should be helping you out here.
Let's see.
So we have been trying to do, I will say, we have been trying to do a collaboration with the Trevor Project because I've been a really big fan of the way that Trevor behaves in the social media space for quite some time, and they have been really trying to convince other organizations, like if the esteemed Trevor Project can do all these really groovy posts and can be playful and lighthearted and then talk about very serious issues, surely if it's good enough for Trevor, I mean, surely it's good enough for you. And we were talking about that, but we hadn't quite managed to get you into the lineup and sort of get that scheduled. And then someone said, you know who you really have to have on the show? You have to have Adam Hunt. And they called some guy over, and there was Mr. Cool Shoes. And of course, if you have cool shoes and you do suicide prevention in social media, we're going to be besties. This is just how this works for me. For Bart, it was the pocket square. For Adam's shoes, I care about haberdashery and accessorization. Correct, Bart?
You actually, I don't know. Yeah, you actually made me wear the pocket square, April. I don't know that everybody knows that. You actually forced me to wear that. And when I didn't wear the pocket square, you got very upset and pretty much mandated that if I was going to be on the show, I had to wear the pocket square. So
have you seen the one with the pocket square that drips? You have not. I've found your Christmas gift. Okay. So, Bart, tell us a little bit about what you've noticed with how Trevor behaves in the social media space. It's important.
Well, the way that Trevor behaves in social media that is so impressive is that it's natural and normal, and it connects with youth culture and the way that youth are when using social media. So I think that probably the thing about watching the Trevor Project tweets so much, so for instance, just to give you an example, I was kind of tweeting back and forth between the Trevor Project account and Tyler's account, right? And so, and the theme and the feel was very consistent, right? Now, then I went and clicked to, like, I'm just going to click to one of the Alphabet People suicide prevention accounts, right? And it just visually, it feels completely different. It's like you've stepped into a completely different space, right? So I think one of the things that I think that Trevor does really well is Trevor mirrors the culture and the theme and the language of the people that they want to connect with, which makes really good sense. I think. So if I was going to use, one phrase, it's cultural competence, right? It's being culturally competent in how you use social media.
How we doing, Adam?
I'm okay. I don't know. How am I coming across over there?
You sound great.
That's excellent. I'm happy to hear that.
Okay, so Adam, we were talking about you being culturally competent, and that one of the things that we like is that Trevor really regularly uses mediums the way that their target audience uses the medium. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about Trevor, your role in Trevor, how it got started, and just why you do the work you do with Trevor.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my role with the Trevor Project isn't necessarily social media. I actually pause. Did we actually introduce and say what the Trevor Project is and what our whole thing is? Why don't I say that first? Because the Trevor Project is the only national suicide prevention and crisis intervention lifeline or organization geared toward LGBT youth. We have a 24-hour, 7 days a week lifeline. We have an instant message program, Trevor Chat, and we have our very own social media platform, Trevor Space, which I can talk about a little bit later. That's specifically just for LGBTQ youth. So what I do at the Trevor Project,
why would you need to do that?
Because I'm glad you asked that, because LGB youth are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual peers, and a lot of these youth live in communities that may not have supportive people in their lives.
That's very benign at least, and could be very, very harmful and abusive at worst.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I got the statistic wrong. It's LGBT youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide, and questioning youth are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide than their straight peers.
So they really need support.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we know that isolation is a major factor in a major risk factor for somebody who might be considering suicide, and for LGBT youth who may not be very supportive at home or at school, that risk is heightened, right? So only 60% of youth who need mental health care actually receive it, and suicide is the second leading cause of death among youth as young as 10 to about age 24. So we definitely know that the need is there. And we're kind of, there are definitely some excellent peer talk lines and such out there, but there isn't really.
We've just had another freeze.
I think
is that a good summary?
Yeah, you just a little bit at the end we lost, but I think we got the heart of it. Was just simply that the LGBTQ youth they're at more risk, and some of it is about their environment, and so they just need support. And the Trevor Project is a group deciding to take care of themselves. It's really when you think about it, population health.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Why are you involved with Trevor Project? Why do you do this? Because you do suicide prevention with an at-risk population. Why is this important for you?
I had my own personal struggle with suicidal ideation as a teenager, and a lot of that wasn't necessarily because I identify as gay. I don't need to go into my own everything that was wrong with my situation at the time, but I did struggle with it, and struggled with my sexuality for a very long time. So I started out as a volunteer. I volunteered on the Lifeline, and I answered calls for a few years, and then got hired at Trevor. And now I oversee and facilitate the West Coast operations for the Lifeline. And I absolutely love what I do. I've heard the voices on the other end, and I know that the need is there, and so I can wake up and be excited to go to work every day, and I go home knowing that I made a difference. So that's pretty much why I do it. Does that answer your question?
That's great. So we talk about this population really taking care of itself, and you just saying, you know, when I was a youth, I really needed this, and now as an adult, I feel good. I feel like every day when I do this work effectively, I feel good about what I do, and that's really why a lot of us do this kind of work, and we're so glad that we have one of us here with us today. So tell us a little bit about how Trevor sort of approaches suicide prevention and media messaging.
Oh, that's a great question. So we try to use like our social media messaging as kind of a redirect to our crisis services. We want to keep our social media as relevant as possible to engage the youth and have them engage them in conversation. We want them to pay attention to our social media, so we have to make it relevant, right? So then when we do post something that's saying, hey, are you like, do you need a hand? Like, do you need some support today? Like, call this number. Like, we're here for you. And I think keeping that the media as relevant as possible and engaging those conversations and highlighting intersectionality between people in the LGBT population really helps us retain and gain new followers so that they can be redirected to those crisis services when they're needed.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about social media, and I'm hoping Bart will also break in and comment, as being about network and about being relationships. I mean, what it sounds like is Trevor's really trying to be effective with media so they'll have good enough relationships so that when someone needs help, they'll know where to get it.
Yeah, we want to. I think it's also important for our social media to be as safe of a space as possible to reflect what we want our crisis services to be. You know, we want our crisis services to be a safer place for youth who are struggling, who are in crisis, to give us a call, tell us about what's going on, and let us, empower them to help themselves. And I think when we have a social media presence that's safe and validating, it helps the youth, the young people, trust that our crisis services are going to be safe and validating as well.
The good news is it's so easy to get the trust of people who are young. They're so trusting, and they're not fickle at all, and they're such an easy audience to win over, right? Bart, do you have any commentary?
That was sarcasm, right?
That was so much sarcasm.
It was fairly sarcastic. That was, yeah. What do you think, Adam?
About what you guys cut out for a hot second.
I was saying good that it's so easy to engage youth with media and to win their trust. They're so trusting. They're not fickle. They just believe what you tell them, and they hear your good messaging, and they're so easy to connect with on social media, right?
Not at all. No. Well, young people are smart and they're resilient. They're fighting some pretty tough stuff out there, and they're not going to be fooled easily. They're not. Yeah.
And someone's even putting here, it's crazy how many people are still bullied about their sexuality. I had many friends back in high school who were afraid to come out, and really talking about that young people know what's going on. They know bullshit when they hear it. They know when they're being fed a line, and they're facing really, really tough things, and sometimes people talk down to them and give them sort of corny advice. Like we give them Leave It to Beaver advice about problems you see on The Wire.
Yeah. It's like, the idea of, it getting better. It gets better. It gets better in and of itself, isn't necessarily enough. I absolutely love the It Gets Better campaign for what it's done to give hope to so many youth out there, and to get so much support from allies as well. But it's like there's another step to it. We as a society, and as responsible adults who have gotten through a lot of this, it's our responsibility to make it better, to make a safer society for these kids.
So you're not just engaging them, you're also really creating a world that's better for them to live in, by the way that you guys behave. And you actually have some very a couple of really specific ways that you do social media. And what I really love, and someone's mentioning I'm being a little sarcastic, because I am, and I apologize for. Well, no, I don't know if I apologize for it. The issue is I often am trying to tell folks from other areas of the mental health and suicide prevention spheres things that the Trevor Project really understands. And what you're hearing is my angst from sort of having beat my head against the wall too many times. But the truth is that the Trevor Project, instead of trying to be really precious and fragile about their messaging, is very robust. And they have a couple of ways that they approach messaging. And you were talking about this earlier today, about mission and about conversations you want to create. And I was wondering if you would tell us more about your strategy for messaging and your checks and balance system.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think the checks and balances came out of being asked if we ever go too far or something like that, and I think that the checks and balances, having a nice like staff of creative, solid-minded thinkers is excellent. Everybody has a bunch of fantastic ideas, and I think it all just comes back to how is this post relevant to what we're doing. Like, how is it relevant to saving a young life? Is this going to make somebody feel safe? How is this going to validate somebody? Or are we just posting it just because we want to stir the pot? And so I think
wrong. And you're not saying there's anything wrong with stirring the pot, but it needs to serve.
Absolutely not.
It needs to serve your mission, and it needs to build a conversation that you're intending to have, right?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that clarification. But yeah, we want to post something that isn't necessarily like we're dictating the conversation. If we're going to post an article, we don't need to say what the opinion should be about this article. It can be like hey, what do y'all think? Kind of leave it open-ended. Let people engage. It is social media after all. So letting people engage on there and having a conversation about something that they wouldn't have otherwise, seen on your average mental health Facebook page,
That is wonderful. Say more about engaging people, because this is something that I also think that I would love for more people who are in the suicide prevention community planning media campaigns to hear.
I think a big component, a huge key, is starting a conversation about, well, for us specifically, starting a conversation about things that aren't necessarily just gender and sexuality centric. There are the LGBTQ population is so incredibly diverse, and there are so many intersecting identities that go on with that. So there are LGBTQ people who are oppressed, maybe not because they're LGBT, but maybe because of race. Maybe because maybe they're struggling with body positivity. There are all these things that intertwine and affect people who are calling us, and it's not necessarily just coming out. Today's National Coming Out Day, and so that's why I mention it. But even we're seeing like a kind of a trend, a kind of trend change on why people are calling us. 10 years ago, it would be people thinking of coming out and wanting resources and help to do that safely. And we still get that today, but we're seeing more of the intersecting identities come through in our calls and with the youth that are using our services, because there are so many other components to being a young person today, especially being a young person in a minority today. So I think it's important for our social media to reflect that. Just as because we recognize, that's so key and that's so important for the people who are calling.
Adam, you're not telling me there's more than 2 types of gay people and that you need more messaging than that?
No, there are only 2 types of gay people. Fundamentally, that's one of the things that's really difficult for the Trevor Project, that they're taking a really specific area of risk and need, but the truth is that within that diversity, there's a whole bunch of other
other kinds of diversity, and they create messaging that reaches a lot of people. So to be really good with such a diverse, so first of all, a marginalized population that is really, really diverse sort of within the ranks, and to do it on the scale that they do it, which may be one of the larger scales, and it's highly interactive. I mean, there's something to be said that you've already, like, results have already been proven, have already been proven with what you guys do.
Did you ask a question? You cut out for like another second.
That's my fault. Bart, tell them about my monologuing.
So I'd like to, but often when you monologue, April, I kind of space out and I start thinking about other things. So, but I think one of the things. I'm sorry, but it's true. So one of the a little bit of truth. So I think one of the things that Ed has been getting at that I really appreciate is it mirrors good crisis intervention and good suicide intervention. It's about having the conversation that your audience wants to have, not the conversation you want to have them have, right? And I think that that's really, really vital. And I think it's one of the things when I look at messaging from other areas, I think it's a point that they completely miss. And I think when it comes to youth, it's even more important. And people are so afraid, well, what if they start talking about things we don't want them to talk about? Well, God, wouldn't it be great if they're talking? So that's a really
it's
good
kind of
thing.
like, I mean, it's suicide, like it's suicide prevention. There are going to be uncomfortable conversations, but we have to have those. We have to talk about mental health. We have to talk about this kind of stuff because the longer it stays untalked about, the longer it stays stigmatized. Sometimes we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
That is really, this is really antithetical to sort of the old guard's training about media, which is control the message almost at all costs, and including at the expense of having a conversation. You're not having a conversation. You're controlling the message that you want everyone to have, and it's a very different way of being.
Mm-hmm.
Bart?
Well, that's not a conversation. That's dogmatic, right? Just to throw that word out there, because I really
Great
like
use of dogmatic, Bart.
I know, isn't it? I've been learning a lot, and dogma is one of the words I'm trying to work in as many conversations as possible. And I think that what Trevor Project, when you watch what you guys do with social media, is that you're there alongside of people as part of a conversation and as a support of that, right? You're not forcing things down people's throats, and you're not freaking out. And I think that one of the things and that's really, really powerful. And what that says, it's about trust, isn't it? I mean, really, in the end, I think that one of the things that irks me tremendously is that there's a lack of trust in many of the prevention community's messaging that, well, we have to do it this way because we don't trust that people will do it appropriately. Well, guess what? If you don't trust people, they don't trust you. And then trust is a two-way street, and people figure that out. And I find it really interesting that when you let people lead the conversation, they will take care of business, man, and beautiful things will happen. And that's what I see you guys doing so well.
I'm pulling the camera back on you, Adam, but I want to let you know some of the comments that, speaking of leading the conversation and letting people talk about what they actually need to talk about, people are really sharing their experiences of coming out as gay, or like how their towns are handling it. Several people talking about growing up in rural America, different decades, and how difficult it was being openly harassed in schools. That sort of daily experience of oppression like still sticks with them and sort of powerfully shapes the way that they experience the world. How can social media help? If everybody in your environment, or a lot of people in your environment, are not sex positive and they're not very positive about your sexual identity or the way that you sort of see yourself, how can a Facebook presence help with that?
I think that it's a few points. I think that having a Facebook presence, we have a large audience, which is we're very thankful for, and so we are able to post affirming, validating statements and articles and things like that to educate people who otherwise wouldn't be educated on something like that. We also, I think this might be also like a good time to mention, since you mentioned lack of support in young people's everyday lives. I do want to mention that along the lines of Facebook, I kind of alluded to it earlier. We have a program called Trevor Space, and it's like It's like Facebook, but it is it's a social media site, like a network for LGBTQ youth and their allies, and it's very safe. Only youth can join, and it's private, closed. Where people of all identities can join, and they can speak safely internationally. So that has been a tremendous resource for some of these young people who don't have support in their hometown, because we see the least accepting areas of the country are these rural areas. That don't have, it's not these big cities, so they don't have access to, the seminars and education, like constant education. So that's where social media comes in. I'm sorry, and we already know that young people are huge consumers of social media. They live on social media. Mm-hmm. So we have created an environment of having this like safer, supportive network where youth can talk to each other and make friends from across the country who are going through similar things, and support each other when in the home or in your school environment that might not be what you're getting.
So you aren't just creating messaging; you're also creating conversations that people have where you're not necessarily directing it. I mean, that's one of the things that Trevor does really well, is it creates space and then lets people use the space the way they need to.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking through here. Oh my goodness, people are really talking about stigma and bullying. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, bullying can be a huge. We've seen it is a huge contributing factor to.
Had just a
life. What was that?
Go ahead.
And so we know that that's a huge, and I think that it's we have to take it a little further from just crisis intervention ourselves. What we're doing to educate those kids who are doing the bullying, and educate the rest of society who's letting that perpetuate. It's not his fault for considering suicide because of that. Just telling that person to buck up, it'll get better, isn't helpful. What is helpful is holding the people accountable who are isolating and harassing those young people. And I also want to use that opportunity to touch on that it isn't always bullying. That a lot of people think that because bullying is a hot topic, that bullying is like the main reason why somebody would consider ending their life, or why somebody would call the Trevor Project. But we don't actually get that a lot, as much as we do mental health. Mental health and lack of support. I mentioned earlier that only 60% of young people are getting mental health care that they need, and so we do.
Hold the phone. You mean that our mental health care system is inadequate, and it just happens to be inadequate for everyone and people who are gay?
No, our mental health system is actually really perfect for everybody.
They're liking the sarcasm today, Adam. So
okay,
the mental health system is generally inadequate, and it is even more so inadequate if you're from the LGBTQ community, and especially if you live in rural America where many people live, where you might not be able to get help at all, and if you do, it may very well be with someone who's not familiar with LGBTQ issues. They just may not be culturally competent in that area.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's also it's tough because there is such a stigma with mental health. I don't want to blame the system entirely. Our mental health system isn't great, but it also goes back to educating and informing the people that you fall and you break your leg, you're going to go to the doctor for it. But what happens?
Go ahead.
And it's the same issue with suicide. We're not, people don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. It makes people uncomfortable. So we have to get past that, and we have to talk about mental health. And we have to talk about suicide so people can get the care that they need.
Absolutely, and one of the things, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we do this is, you know, why SPSM does this chat and why we cover different topics every week, is that when we talk about suicide, it's not all populations have risk for the same reasons or have the same needs, and so one of the great things.
Absolutely, I'm really glad you said that. Yeah.
So say more about that.
Well, it's just, you know, it's your sarcastic comment earlier. You know, two types of gay people. People are facing very unique battles right now, and always. Young people are no different. There are a lot of additional factors to take into consideration when somebody might be suicidal or oppressed or both. You know, there are cultural, meaning their personal cultures, like within their families. There are cultural aspects that we need to consider. You know, and how maybe some cultures are going to view their LGBT identity. And so, you know, and on that, you know, you can have there are eating disorders. There's mental illness. There's, you know, the list goes on of all the different things that somebody could be facing at one time. And if we're only focusing on bullying, for example, then we're doing a disservice to our youth.
Are you saying that people who might be at risk of suicide have complicated problems and are multidimensional as well?
Yeah. Glad you picked up on that.
Because, I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, when we talk about creating really static messaging or no conversation, so there's no back and forth, and we just pick one topic, bullying, and the newspaper does a story, and they sort of tell a narrative, they were bullied so they died, and we miss, well, they had family history of depression, they had a significant substance abuse problem that started as an adolescent, you know, we have lots of contacts with law enforcement. They may have issues related to their sexual development that have not gone well, and you know, they may their family may be financially insecure, and so there may even be issues with homelessness. And you start to think about that, and then we say to somebody, oh, it gets better, and they're like, are you sure? Because look at this list of things that are happening to me all at once. And generally, when we're speaking to people in crisis, it's not one thing that has happened to them. They didn't go into crisis because of one thing. It's usually because of 5 things.
Right, exactly.
Well, and I think that gets to a larger issue, and it's one of the areas where and I'm a big fan of social media, but one of the consequences of social media is that there's a tendency to oversimplify issues, right? And so we end up talking about issues in these very, very one-dimensional sound bites, and it gets really hard to unpack the complexity of many of these issues, right? So that all gets connected together, and I think one of the words that you've been using a lot gets to the sense of community, right? And when we develop communities, we get beyond these soundbite communications. We get beyond these one-liner promo-type social media engagements, and we get into folks actually talking about what's really going on. We get into engagement where that complexity and what it means to be a person really comes out. I think working at a crisis line, I agree with Adam. You know, bullying sometimes comes up, but that's rarely the primary issue that youth are calling us. Sometimes it does come out in those conversations, but one of the things we hear a lot is a lot of pain, uncertainty, and feeling disconnected, feeling like they're not connected anywhere, right? And there's lots of reasons why folks aren't connected. And I think one of the things that's so vital, and that's why I'm a huge fan of social media and efforts like the Trevor Project, is that community can happen anywhere. And that we need to be really supportive of creating communities and letting communities develop where they will occur naturally. And social media is a great place where communities can develop safely and folks can connect with each other that normally wouldn't connect with one another. And I think Trevor Project does a great job of creating that safe space for folks.
And I'm pulling you up. One of the things that we talked about was that Trevor, you know, worked on starting conversations. Can you give us an example of some of the conversations that you started, or some, like, I asked you if you might share some anecdotes about things you've done.
Okay. Let's see. You know, I also want to you know, clarify that, like, I don't want to say that we're necessarily the ones starting the conversation. There are some amazing people out there who are having these conversations and everything, but we definitely want to encourage that and continue certain conversations that may not be being had as much as they should. You know, we've had you know,
I'm just going to tell you, my cat, who hates everyone, has never been on a chat before. You've made her feel so safe.
Oh.
Come out from under my bed across the house to say hello.
It's the backdrop. It's the backdrop.
Go ahead.
It's the backdrop.
You did maybe start the conversation, but you certainly facilitate them and give them energy.
Yeah. You know, we've had some good conversations about asexuality, for example, pansexuality, and a lot. And I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm like on the spot now. I just don't.
But let's talk.
I keep talking and talking.
I'm gonna let you know the secret. Not everyone, although this is a better audience than most, is gonna know what asexuality or pansexuality is, and I'm wondering if someone might want to sort of clue them in to what those terms mean.
Cool. Yeah, asexuality, you know, it can be commonly defined as somebody who, you know, isn't necessarily sexually attracted to anyone, regardless of gender. And then pansexuality is you know, everything good? Everything good? Oh.
Yeah, everything's good. I'm thinking of what's his name? Was it Jack off of Torchwood? Where they called him a trisexual, he'll try anything. Which is sort of the joke, but is actually a character that's meant to sort of represent pansexuality, which is this broad variety of sexual interests, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Are you okay, Bart?
Yeah, you're fine. It's fine. The Jack off of Torchwood caught me a little by surprise.
Damn, he's adorable. He's adorable. But you guys work on really creating relationships and you know, like, I mean, like sometimes even within the community, it's not like just because you're a member of the LGBTQ community, you walk around with a glossary and you know everything. I mean, this is a chance for people who are very diverse to begin to have conversations in a way that benefits and advocates for the whole community, which I think is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and you know what? We also see that you know, young people are coming on these calls and these instant messages, identifying with terms that many of our counselors hadn't heard before. And so I think the important thing is to ask, you know, hey, like, how do you define that? Like, what does that mean to you? And then validate it. You know, regardless of how they're identifying. Even if it's a label or a word that we've never heard before, their identity is valid, and it's our job to.
You don't have one list with all the okay labels?
Yeah, it's right here.
I mean, right. So oftentimes, and I only make this joke because oftentimes another reason that people really struggle doing social media, and Trevor does the opposite, which is that they say these are the set terms that are okay terms or words, and then they rethink those words and rethink those words. And it's really hard for them to go with the flow of the words that people are using, which may or may not be on the press sheet that you have in front of you. And so when we talk about a conversation, it's people sort of, and what did you mean by that? And they're sort of adding or contributing. You also, I mean, your network is, I'm a little jealous, Trevor Project. Your network is huge. Big. Tell us a little bit about how Trevor's grown such a big network, because I think your Twitter account has, what, 250,000 followers, something like that, and then you have a huge Facebook presence.
Sorry, every couple of minutes it just like freezes and I miss it. But tell us how Trevor's grown such a big network. Was there anything after that?
And 250,000 followers or so on Twitter. You have a really engaged, active Facebook presence. You know, we were talking about Tyler Oakley, and I'm so jealous because I'm such a fan of his. And people like Hannah Hark from My Junk Kitchen, and if you don't know what that is, it's YouTube genius. So, like, can you tell a little bit about how Trevor's built relationships and works with all these other presences to build conversation?
Maybe a little bit. I don't work in the social media realm, so I'm not sure exactly how those conversations get started between partnering with other people and growing. I don't know. I guess when you look at the analytics and the numbers, like I don't know how you get something growing. I just know that we do our best to create a safe environment for the people who do follow us, and I would imagine that is a pretty big contributing factor to our growing following.
Yeah, you guys have, I think one of the things we talked about is that Trevor really has a wonderful presence, that you have people who are really young and energetic, sort of doing messaging, and then you work hard to really collaborate. So you have somebody who's like Tyler Oakley, and for those of you who don't know, go check out his YouTube channel, and he and Grace Helbig hosted the Streamies this year, which think of that as sort of the MTV Music Awards, but for this millennium. And correct? I'm trying to translate for the middle-aged folks who are on the call, right, or on the show. Right, so the host of the Streamies. So think of Tyler Oakley would be sort of what to us when we were kids in the 80s and 90s would have been like a really popular VJ on MTV. And so Tyler Oakley is on the board at Trevor, and he regularly for his birthday asks people to donate instead of sending him presents, and he regularly promotes Trevor Project. For example, you have people like Dan Savage and the Savage Love Podcast, for example, or people who have really big followings, and then they do the It Gets Better campaign, and they do it collaboratively with you. So the Trevor Project isn't one voice alone in the wilderness.
Absolutely not. Yeah, I think you pretty much said it.
They said me being a fan of My Drunk Kitchen makes everything else make so much sense. And let me tell you, Marshman, I've been a fan of My Drunk Kitchen for a couple of years now. Hannah Hart was like maybe the first person I followed on YouTube, and I've subscribed to on YouTube, which is embarrassing but true. Additionally, Coming Out Day. Can you talk a little bit about what people do on Coming Out Day on social media? Because that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So National Coming Out Day, I want to say it's 5 years.
I think so,
down or something like that. But like I may be wrong. I'm just putting that out there. But I'm usually wrong. So, no, National Coming.
Whoa.
Yep. There's. I know, but he
comes back.
What was that?
You froze, you froze with the perfect expression on your face. You looked really good. We always freeze looking like we're high, but you look like
look beautiful when you freeze. I look like a freak, Foreman. You got the perfect freeze face. Give me a break.
Is it only when you freeze, Bart? Anyway, so say again, Adam. Tell us a little bit more about Coming Out Day.
So National Coming Out Day is a time when people can kind of bound together to. I think the idea was people can all kind of come out together so they aren't feeling so isolated when they do it, because it is a very scary process, and it is a process. Like it takes for some people coming out is not it takes years. To fully come out. For some people, for many people, it's a continual process, and I'd say for most people, it's a continual process that lasts your whole life. But I think the idea for National Coming Out Day is just so people don't, feel like they're alone in all of it. I love the idea of that, and I love that there's a network out there, of people to support one another, I always, every year for National Coming Out Day, I always stress that, just because it's National Coming Out Day doesn't mean you have to come out. It's all about when you're ready, and it's all about when, you've put together the safety plan, and you have the supportive environment first, because maybe for some people coming out just won't be safe. Yeah. Depending on their school situation or their home situation. So what I usually tell people is like, sometimes you just, sometimes accepting yourself and loving yourself has to be enough for a little bit. You can come out to yourself on National Coming Out Day or on any other day of the year, but you also don't have to. But if you do decide to come out on National Coming Out Day, all of these people are coming out in support of you.
Well, April, having seen that live on today, watching the hashtag today, watching the coming out hashtag, what was really cool is that there was a lot of people coming out about their fight with mental illness. There were people disclosing their fight with previous suicide attempts. One person was talking about someone who was very close to them that died by suicide and how powerful that was in their life. They had never disclosed that before. What was so cool about it was then seeing the level of support that folks got, right? So here people were disclosing, and people were just so supportive and caring in that process. So seeing a community, a supportive, validating community build around people who were being courageous with their disclosure was so incredible to see. It was absolutely beautiful.
And I want to make sure and give Adam a time for some closing thoughts, but on National Coming Out Day for me, as someone who is as heteronormative as I am, there isn't that moment where I've had to do it, but I have so many friends who have had to have that moment where they want to come out to me. And so for me, it is the memories of people who I sort of knew what they were going to, you know, been on the other end of that. Sort of, you sort of know what they're going to tell you. And for me, my deep wish that it wasn't so scary for them, that they didn't, you know, that I'm hoping that they'll know that it's going to be, that I'm going to be okay with them, that I was already okay with them, and that I'm really feel honored that they felt good enough about themselves and about our relationship to tell me. So that for me, coming out day was, for people, like, that was the thing that improved our relationship, because then they could just be really open about a part of their life just like they were about the other parts of their life, and so they could be really relaxed when they were with me. Adam, we are getting to the end of the show, and there are two things left that we need from you. The first is, we want to, you know, what you think is coming in the future of social media and suicide prevention for folks in the LGBTQ community. And the second is, if somebody wants to access crisis services through Trevor, how can they do that?
Alrighty. So for the future of social media and suicide prevention, you know, I don't know what's to come. I just know what I would like to see. I would really like to see people having honest, vulnerable conversations about suicide and mental health. And social media gives us an opportunity to connect with people all around the world who, you know, could be going through something somewhat similar. It has the potential to really remove the isolation that a lot of our young people who are using these services are feeling. So I would like to see social media, you know, become a safer place. I would like it to be a more validating place. I don't know what the future of social media looks like. A friend of mine just last night was saying, how long do you think before Instagram's gone? Like, because, you know, so yeah, I just
started photographing our dinner, it was over.
I'm a big grammer. Instagram is probably my favorite medium. But yeah.
So you don't know what the future will bring, but what you want is a future that is more supportive, more healthy, more embracing of people, like more sex positive, and ready for people who need to come out or who need to be connected with in the service of their mental health and their well-being.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'd say that, you know, for you know, and related to, I guess, like National Coming Out Day, you know, when I think that we're very we're just quick to defend our own preconceived notions of what is what, and that includes how somebody else might identify, and so for us to judge that person because we don't understand it is wrong. And I would just like to see social media become these platforms where people can learn from each other, and rather than negate someone's identity, ask questions. You know, what does that identity mean? And you know what? That's okay. Like, that identity, you're valid the way you are. So I'd like to see more of that, and more honest conversations of.
Mr. Rogers would approve with "You can be loved just the way that you are."
Oh, my heart.
Oh, I know. Well, how can go ahead.
Oh, I was going to go on to your next question about accessing the crisis services. So for accessing the crisis services, the easiest thing to do is go to our website, trevorproject.org. But our lifeline, geared toward LGBTQ youth between the ages of like 13 and 24, that number is 1-866-488-7386. So there's that. Please share that with anybody who anybody watching who you feel may need it. And then I mentioned Trevor Space, our social media, our social medium, that safe environment that that can be accessed at trevorspace.org. So if you know somebody who could use somebody.
If I click, it'll change, I bet you.
What was that?
Maybe not. If I move the cursor, it tends to free up your freezes. So it is trevorspace.org, and can you say the number one more time?
Oh, okay. Did we freeze?
You're back.
Oh, okay. Where did I leave off?
trevorspace.org, and say the number one more time, just because numbers are trickier.
It's 866-488-7386.
We are so glad that you're with us today. We're getting to the last 5 minutes of our show, and this is what we call the final thoughts section. And this is a chance for everybody to tune in. So those of you who are following the hashtag, and we've got some folks who really, really chatted tonight about issues that they haven't before, and I just want to give a shout out to Jack Lumen, and who has shared a lot about his family. It's been really, really helpful. I want to give a shout out to Emily York, of course, to our very own Twirl and Swirl, who is really talking a lot about coming out in multiple ways and how that went. We just a whole lot of wonderful things. A big shout out to Mike Sevilla, who's got really good screenshots, and Bart and Adam look great, and I look high. Thanks, Mike. We're getting to that portion of final thoughts where we talk a little bit about sort of our sum up of what we think the take-home message is. And here is, I think, the thing that people responded to the most, and the big take-home message was that social media is about having relationships and a conversation and keeping it going. And not the conversation that you want to have, but the conversation that people need to have, and that we need to trust people that what they're interested in and what they want to talk about is what is important, not what we want them to hear about. And that, if I could just drill into people's brain and shove one thing in there who are doing a lot of mental health messaging, it's not the message you want them to have, it's what are they already talking about, and what can we do to create something that's more supportive. And that's my final thought. Bart.
Beautiful thoughts as always, April. That was really good. I think in the end, one of the things that I think is really key, and Adam has hit on this, the Trevor Project gets it. It's about being competent with the population that you're trying to work with.
Yes.
Having good knowledge about suicide prevention techniques, having good knowledge about evidence-based practice does not make you culturally competent to message to the group you're trying to reach. In fact, sometimes I think those very same skills may get in the way of you being good at messaging. And so it's a big part of the process is being aware and connected and trusting the folks that you're working with. And you use that word, April. And I think the other thing that the Trevor Project models really well is that you have to take some risks. Social media has inherent risks. Anything worthwhile, let me repeat this, anything worthwhile has inherent risks. And if you're not willing to take those risks, then that's a big challenge, because we ask people to take risks when they disclose to us they're having thoughts of suicide. We ask people to take risks in reaching out to get help from us. It's time for us, when we're messaging, to take risks in how we reach out to people. That's what I'm saying.
And I don't know if we got to talk about this here, and I think this was something Adam mentioned to me earlier, but Bart, you're going to really dig this. Adam was telling me that they have their media team take their crisis intervention class so that they understand what their calls sound like and what their skills are. So the people who are doing their messaging are people who have a working knowledge of the services that they provide.
Can you just say that again? The social media team, their social media team. They have.
They pay for good social media and it works, people.
I don't believe it. That doesn't happen in the real world, April.
Can I just tell you, sorry, Adam, I know we bogarted. It was like 5 final thoughts. Adam, it's your time for final thoughts. If there was one thing you wanted people in SPSM to know, what would it be?
Because it's National Coming Out Day, I'll say that I would just love everybody to just validate one another and just have empathy. You know, we don't need to have lived somebody's life or shared their exact story to be able to empathize with what they're going through. I think that's kind of goes back to the whole dictating the conversation thing versus opening that conversation and letting somebody talk about what they want to talk about, which I really, really liked. You put that in great terms, April. And I think that, you know, if somebody wants to talk to you about a certain thing, there's no need to say, oh, it'll get better, and you know, you just buck up. Have an honest conversation about it. Open up. Be vulnerable. And just validate whatever the person's going through. You know, validate their identity. That's I think that is a you know, we've seen that's a huge factor in reducing someone's risk of suicide when they have one supportive, responsible person in their life that can, really make a difference.
One supportive, responsible person can keep someone alive. Be the one person that somebody knows, that they say, you were the one person I knew I could tell and it would be okay. You can make the world better by being that one person. Oof, wonderful, Adam. Chills. Everybody, it's been another Sunday night. I won't say we've wasted it like I usually say, you've wasted another hour with us tonight. This is a really important week. Do pay attention to the Trevor Project's social media space, like go see #ComingOutDay or #ComingOut. Do check out their Twitter feed. Do check out their Facebook feed this week. They have something called a Twibbon, which I've made a lot of dirty jokes about already. Tell everybody what the Twibbon is, Adam.
It's kind of like with the SCOTUS decision legalizing marriage equality, when Facebook, could have add a filter to make your profile picture a rainbow. Twibbon's basically like a filter that you can put on top of your profile picture in support. We have a Trevor Twibbon right now for National Coming Out Day with our number, so you can identify yourself as somebody who's that responsible person that somebody can go to.
So go use your social media to identify yourself as a responsible, validating person. Use the Twibbon. It may be that no one ever approaches you, but just somebody sees and remembers, so that when they do need to talk to you, they remember that you were the person with the Twibbon, that you had a Twibbon on Coming Out Week because you know what was down. You knew what was up. I don't know. I don't know which direction it was. But you've had another evening with #SPSM. Message me if you have ideas for speakers or topics that you want us to cover in the future. We will be talking specifically about Trans Lifeline next week. Participate in the #ComingOut or Coming Out Day stuff this week. And thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.